One of the funniest moments so far of World Cup 2022 was during the Canada versus Belgium game, where the cameraman panned over to reveal legendary referee Pierre-Luigi Collina sat in the crowd, and he's just like sat there talking to himself. I mean, what a weirdo. What kind of a person just sits in a chair all alone, staring into a camera, talking to themselves? After Iranian goalkeeper Alireza Biernovand clashed face-to-face with Iranian defender Majid Hosseini in the first half of England's World Cup opening game, it was obvious we were in for a lengthy spell of injury time at the end of the first half. Biernovand was left bleeding on the ground for several minutes as the game was stopped, and even after a brief resumption, the game had to be paused once more as it was determined that he would no longer be able to carry on and would need to be replaced. An outcome, of course, that should have come immediately following concussion protocols after the collision, but that's for another video. Either way, when the board went up for 14 minutes added time at the end of the first half, I didn't really think much of it. Maybe it was a little longer than expected, but we've seen large amounts of time added on for injuries of this nature before. What was more surprising was the board going up for 12 further minutes of added time at the end of the regulation 90. Unless the wider footballing world and I simply missed an announcement before the tournament, it seems that FIFA have pulled a fast one on all of us here. 13 minutes were added to the end of the Netherlands versus Senegal game, and almost 15 were added for the Wales versus USA game. Clearly, this is a mitigated and purposeful effort from FIFA to radically change the way added time is calculated and applied. First, let's go back and check some statistics from the 2018 World Cup. According to stats provided by 538, who recorded the average effective playing time for the first 32 matches of that tournament, the time the ball was actually in play varies wildly. Fans watching Egypt versus Uruguay were treated to 63 whole minutes and 2 seconds of ball in play time, while on the other end of the scale, fans in the Kresovsky Stadium were only watching 44 minutes and 36 seconds of ball in play time during Morocco's 1-0 defeat to Iran. Same country, same tournament, but wildly different lengths of the time the game was actually being played for. We can see the same situation at club level too. If we look back at the 2021-2022 season, according to stats provided by Opta, the effective playing time for each team in the Premier League that season ranged from Aston Villa with the lowest average at 52 minutes and 32 seconds to Manchester City with the highest average at 60 minutes and 53 seconds. A little less disparity when the numbers are averaged out over the course of a season like this, but the fact remains the same. Same country, same league, same officials, and yet there's a difference in how long the game is actually being played for. Manchester City fans categorically got to watch, on average, 8 more minutes of football each week than Aston Villa fans did. Is that fair? The data not only shows the huge variations in effective playing time, but the way in which added time is calculated to make up for this is also extremely inaccurate. Again, if we look back at the 538 data, they have also provided a breakdown of the expected amount of added time compared to the amount of added time that was actually provided. Let's take a Group G game between Belgium and Tunisia. The game featured 7 goals as Belgium ran riot, and 538 calculated that 20 minutes and 58 seconds should have been added on across the course of the match in added time. The actual amount of combined added time at the end of the first and second halves was a measly 7 minutes and 14 seconds. That's a difference of 13 minutes and 44 seconds that have just disappeared into thin air. What's interesting looking back is that if we look down the column at the expected number of added minutes 538 have calculated, we have much more polarity with the kinds of added times we are seeing now in the 2022 World Cup. FIFA have taken a real, considerable action here in the fight to prevent time wasting in football. Not only is it surprising that FIFA would even be bold enough to do this in the first place, I find it doubly surprising as a change that affects the game this obviously is, in a way, an admission of guilt that the sport has been allowed to calculate added time this incorrectly for a very long time. It does make you wonder just how added time had been calculated not even as recently as 2 months ago. Many times when I've been watching football, I have been perplexed at the fourth official's board going up and showing a number that often felt nowhere near the number that it should have been. Section 7 in the IFAB rulings, titled Laws of the Match, state that allowance for added time is made by the referee in each half for all playing time lost in that half through substitutions, assessment and or removal of injured players, wasting time, disciplinary sanctions, medical stoppages, delays relating to the VAR checks and reviews, and any other cause. This is a huge remit of reasons that could all contribute to the final amount of added time at the end of each half. And the last point, any other cause, gives huge leeway to add time for practically anything the referee deems worthy. And yet, added time until now has felt intertwined to unwritten expectations of how much should or shouldn't be added on, mostly regardless of what has happened during the game. Never more than, about 2 minutes at the end of the first half. In fact, no real complaints if the first half ends exactly at 45 minutes. 3 or maybe 4 minutes added on at the end of the second half, with the board going up to show the dreaded 5, 6, or the rarely seen but unbelievably tense 7 to be shown, seemingly exclusively during knockout games where one team is holding on for dear life. It's so surprising that with the recent changes for the World Cup, FIFA are basically admitting that, up until now, at best, FIFA affiliated officials simply just weren't very good at getting added time right, and at worst, were sort of just making it up the whole time. And added time in football has been this way for as long as I can remember. It really does make you think just what was the process to calculate all of this previously. The more I think about it, the more I think about just how groundbreaking this actually might be. We're already seeing some of the effects. Previously, checking a scoreline to see that a team has scored a 98th minute winner was a massive deal that evoked a very, visceral emotion. Just how were there 8 whole minutes of injury time? Oh, I can't believe they didn't manage to hold on. But when Rouzbeh Chesney scored for Iran in the 98th minute to sink Wales's hopes of qualifying for the round of 16, there was really none of this. A goal in the 98th minute of extra time seemed practically normal compared to some of the other amounts of added time we've seen at the end of the second half in the other group stage games. And in fact, there was so much time added to the end of this game that Iran grabbed a second at 90 plus 11. 90 plus 11. Think about what your reaction would have been to seeing a 90 plus 11 winning goal just a couple of months ago, and then think about the comparative apathy when it actually happened. There are even further implications too. For all of you out there who love an Excel spreadsheet clearly as much as I do, many player statistics in football analytics are averaged out over a per 90 minute period to account for the variance in playing time between players. Up until now, added time was such an insignificant add-on that per 90 was a perfectly acceptable metric in which to define a football match. But, well, now what? If this level of added time scrutiny is continued into the club game, this will surely have to be accounted for. Not only that, but what about goal scoring records? Who holds the record for latest goal scored in regulation time at a World Cup? Is it now Mehdi Taremi, who scored a penalty for Iran versus England as the last kick of the game at 90 plus 14? I guess it must be. Or do we now need some kind of system like added time inflation, where we adjust previous goals scored in added time to what they would have been if we use the same system of calculating added time back then as we do now? And okay, look, maybe I've overthought that example, but I genuinely believe that this has completely changed the way we, as fans, feel about added time. Interestingly, in what feels like a first for the sport, the whole change has actually gone down pretty smoothly. Bar some brief confusion during the first few games regarding all the huge numbers we were seeing on the boards of fourth officials, everyone has just seemingly come to accept it. Games go on for 98 minutes now, maybe even over 100 minutes. A goal in the 98th minute means there's still 4 minutes to go down the other end and try and get an equaliser. Teams that are 1-0 up in the 80th minute no longer have just 12-ish minutes to hold on to. It's probably going to be like 20. They've still got a while to hold on yet. Ultimately, I think this is because added time in football has always felt a bit broken. A number picked from a vibe or pulled out of thin air. A number that may be arbitrarily less if one team is winning by a large margin heading towards 90 minutes, or a number that may be arbitrarily bigger for other reasons that no one can quite get their head around. In a first for FIFA in what feels like an age, this change sort of just makes perfect sense. We're correctly calculating added time now. Deal with it. The only arguments I've seen against this change is that seeing a scoreboard showing 100 plus minutes just doesn't feel right and isn't the right spirit of the game, which is all a very only in football argument to make, and it's just too feeble to carry any real weight or outrage over. There actually seems to be ground for a compelling thought process behind all this. In recent years, we've already seen FIFA introduce new rules and regulations in the fight against time wasting. Obviously, we've always had bookings for egregious examples, but it wasn't so long ago that we saw the introduction of a rule regarding substitutes having to leave the pitch at the nearest touchline rather than slowly walk across the entire pitch to the dugouts. This rule especially seemed like an ineffective band-aid just slapped over the laceration, which is the epidemic of time wasting. Look, you don't need to introduce rules like this if you just actually calculate any time that was wasted throughout the match accurately. For all the many mistakes FIFA have made regarding the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, this one actually might be a great decision. Or is it? On the other hand, there's an argument to be made here that artificially lowering the time the ball is in play is part of the dark arts of football, a charm to the game that some teams and some managers are masters in. It's no surprise that the game with the lowest in-play time in the 2018 World Cup was Morocco versus Iran. Back in the summer of 2018, Iran were ranked 37th in the world, far off the 20th rank they find themselves in now. Iran were dominated by Morocco as Morocco came away from the game with 68% possession compared to Iran's 32%. It was in Iran's best interest to slow the game down, take their time with set pieces and waste time. The less time the ball was in play, the less chance there was of Morocco scoring a goal with all their possession. And we can see this reflected in the 21-22 Opta data too. While Norwich at 54 minutes and 48 seconds are an outlier, the teams at the bottom of this in-play leaderboard, Aston Villa, Southampton, Burnley, Leeds, were all some of the weakest teams in the Premier League last season. These teams, be it deliberately or not, were using football's inability to correctly enforce added time to help them get results. If you're the weaker team, it benefits you to play football for as little time as possible when you're against Manchester City, especially if you can nick a goal and take a lead. Managers like Tony Pulis, Neil Warnock, Sean Dyche's Burnley were masters at this, weren't they? Using the dark arts and the technicalities of the footballing rulebook to slow games down, play less, and grind out results. And, deep down, don't we all sort of love them a bit for this? Teams didn't fear going away to places like Burnley because they would be schooled with the ball, but they knew that the game would be played at a snail's pace. It would be played on the Burnley clock, and even if they may not have realised it, they would need to go and get a result when the ball would be literally in play for less time than when facing other teams in the league. In a world where the oil-backed super clubs are pulling away from the rest of the pack, and with the recent news of Manchester United and Liverpool being up for sale, it wouldn't be surprising to see Middle Eastern billionaire ownership come to them too. Is there not an argument to be made that having the ability to grind a game down and keep the ball rolling for as little as possible is a small but tangible leveller for clubs with less resources to go and get results against the big boys? We've already seen a recent change across European football to substitutions, with now 5 permitted, up from the previous 3, which arguably benefits the big teams with the stacked squads. This more accurate process of adding on time does help average out how long the ball is in play across all football matches, but is it yet another change that ultimately benefits the big boys with all the deep squads and all the resources? If we're going to start accurately adding on time now to prevent time wasting, then I feel we're already heading down a road that is leading to just one destination. And that's the idea of football running on a stop clock. 55 or maybe even 60-minute long matches that run against a clock that is stopped by a fourth official every time the ball goes out of play. This way we reach a much cleaner, simpler and easier to understand to the casual football viewer way of timing a match. No longer are we left waiting to see how long is left of a game as we approach 90 minutes, only to see a +14 appear on the score ticker in the top left corner of our screens. The clock will run until a clean 60 minutes, where the game then ends at the referee's discretion. Look, don't panic, the game doesn't have to end dead on the second it ticks over to 60. If the ball falls to your team's striker facing an open goal, the referee doesn't have to immediately end it, but we simply stop the clock for all opportunities where the ball isn't in play. The fourth official on the sideline clicks a button when the player goes down injured, or a substitute occurs, or the ball goes out for a throw-in. He then simply presses it again when play is resumed. Look, it's 2022. I'm absolutely confident we have the ability to sync this clock to the broadcasting feeds and even to the big screens in the stadiums so the fans can see it start and stop in real time too. Of course, players will still time waste and attempt to break up the game as they do now, but a stop clock prevents this time from disappearing from the match with the way added time was calculated previously, and prevents ridiculous situations where we see goals scored in the 11th minute of injury time with the way it works now. I've seen some arguments in the past against this idea, which normally centre around the notion that timing a football match like this would open the door to mid-game advertising and would Americanise the sport. But I just don't really think this would happen. First and foremost, football is already absolutely full of advertising. We have advertising on the shirts, in the stadiums, before the match, at half time, at full time, all the rest of it. If broadcasters wanted to push their luck with even more advertising, they already have ample opportunities to do so. When a player goes down injured in a match, is there anything already preventing Sky Sports from cutting away to that Renault advert with Thierry Henry? Although it doesn't happen frequently in England, I'm certain that I've watched football abroad in other countries where we already have tickers that run along the bottom of the screen with advertisements, or a picture-in-picture box in the corner of the screen showing advertisements during a lull period in the match. Yes, look, timing football against a stop clock does Americanise the sport in the sense that it brings football slightly closer to sports like basketball and American football, but those sports are timed in such a way for a reason, and that's because it's a logical and effective way to do so. Football is already too entrenched in tradition and in history and slow to take influence from other sports. This resistance has been seen especially recently as the slow uptake of data-driven analysis has worked its way into the game, when sports like baseball have been at the cutting edge of data-driven models for absolutely ages now. Of course, running football against a stop clock and ending games dead on 60 minutes would absolutely be a fundamental and groundbreaking change. As mentioned previously in this video, this would cause massive complications in regards to calculating player metrics and how we record goal scoring records in relation to the time in which they were scored. There would have to be a watershed moment where we all just accept that future records come with their own little asterisks regarding the change in how we time the game. But this isn't even unheard of for football. Let's not forget, football originally didn't allow for tactical substitutions. Football originally had different offside rules and originally allowed goalkeepers to pick up back passes. It's fair to say all of those rule changes were seen as groundbreaking at the time and were met with resistance by many, but have allowed for a quicker and better sport since their introduction. Why should we hold back on changing the way we time a football match just because we like to see the number 90 in the corner of the screen? Look, I understand that football has to be careful that it doesn't completely sterilise itself. Football has been played in one form or another across the globe for over 150 years, and games have been 90 minutes long for practically all of that time. I think that unwritten rules are honestly as big of a part of the game as the written ones, and these changes could well be the death for teams that play the game within the game to waste time and get results. But if we're going to calculate injury time accurately now, and if the World Cup is anything to go by, then it looks like FIFA are pushing for it, then why don't we just simply go all the way and start timing the game in the most effective way possible? Look, change can be scary because change isn't always good, but this just seems like the most logical destination that this is headed towards. Oi, ref, how long? Ref, how long? Ref, how long? Ref, how long's left? Ref, how long? How long? Surely, ref. Surely. Ref, how long? Ref, how long? How long left? Ref. Ref, how long? 11? 11? 1-1. 11? How long? 12? 12? That's a joke, ref. 12. Where's 12 come from? 8? 8? Where's the 8 come from then, ref? 8 minutes. 13? You're adding on 13 minutes. Ref, how long left? Ref. Hey, how long left? Ref. Ref, how long? 16? 16 minutes.